Welcome to another installment of All Strut No Fret one-shots. Now I've got a really quirky one for you today. We're going to do Supposes by Gascoigne. Now in the frame of English early modern theatre, this is a really old one because it was published first in 1575. And you're going to recognise it if you know your Shakespeare, because what this is, and the reason it makes it interesting to us really, is it's the source for the subplot of The Taming of the Shrew. So not the shrew bit of the story, but the younger sister Bianca's courtship part of the story. It's just a direct lift from this. There's no real major changes. But there's a couple of other interesting things about it before I get onto the thing that I'm here for, which is to drink my shot and tell you the plot. In one shot, no cuts, no edits. That's the rules. So things that make this interesting. It was written first by the Italian poet Ariosto in 1509. So it is by the time Shakespeare put Shrew on the stage in the 1590s, we're talking about material being a solid 80 years old. It was translated from the Ariosto by Gascoigne, and as I said, published in 1575, so still quite a bit earlier than Shakespeare. And the play was called Supposes, and it has this really quirky thing in it where anytime a character supposes something, so that sort of means assumes something or thinks something is going on with the plot, but sometimes it's just an opinion. It has this little side note here that tells you another suppose, a knavish suppose, or a shrewd suppose, or a beastly suppose, and don't know what that was about. It is it's written in prose rather than verse, and it is, I think you can see it's Italian farce origins. But I should get on with my job and actually drink my shot and tell you the plot. The shot today it's just vodka, but I have popped a drop of Parfait Amour in it because it just is prettier if it has a bit of colour. Isn't that pretty purple? And Parfait Amour, hey, it's a romance we're doing. So here we go. Supposes by Gascoigne in one shot. Okay, give me a moment. The play opens in Ferrara, which is in northern Italy. It's a really Italian play, which you can tell again if you look at Shrew. It's really just about being Italian in a lot of ways. So it opens in Ferrara. We see a lovely young woman, Polynesta, talking to her nurse, and the nurse is upbraiding her for carrying on an affair with a servant in her father's household called Dulipo. Now, this is an interesting diversion from the nature of Shakespeare's plays too, because Cressida aside, his young lady heroines are usually pretty chaste until the whole end of the play marriage thing. But Polynesta and Dulipo have been shagging for months, and it's been really, very much going the whole way here, which is much more in keeping with the sort of Italian, Decameron and sort of Renaissance material where no one was terribly prudish in those stories. So Polynesta has been bonking Dulipo, but she reveals to her nurse that it's not as scandalous as the nurse assumes, because Dulipo has revealed to her that when he first arrived in Ferrara, he laid eyes on our heroine, fell madly in love with her, and concocted a scheme whereby he and his manservant exchanged places, because he is really a young man called Erostrato, of good family from Sicily. He'd come north to go to university, but he didn't want to be spending his time at uni. He wanted to be spending his time chasing Polynesta. So he swapped places with Dulipo, who is taking his place as Erostrato. You see the Eros reference there in the name. taking his place, but making a household in Ferrara, becoming known as Erostrato, the fine young man from Sicily, while he, Filippo, got a job as a servant in Polynesta's father's household in order to have the opportunity to be near her. So that's been working terribly well for them for some months now. Now we've got all that exposition at the beginning of the scene. We never see Polynesta again. It's just more on the dramaturgy at the end maybe, but plot. You're interested in plot. So here we go. The problem, of course, is that in his guise as servant, he can't reveal his suit to Polynesta's father, Damon. So, of course, there's a rival suitor, and of course he's an old man that she's not interested in. His name in this case is the Senex's name. That's the old man obstacle. His name is Cleander. And it's difficult to know whether to call him Erostrato or Filippo, and it's actually really confusing in the script, because for most of the script, he is referred to as Filippo, and Erostrato is referred to, and Filippo is referred to as Erostrato. But then right at the end, when all is revealed, the script swaps the names, which is a bit confusing for anyone who's reading it. But I'll call him Filippo for now, because that's the name he's going by. So Cleander has put his suit to Polynesta's father, Damon, but he's okay because he's an old man and a rich doctor, and so he can just say, yes, I can offer her this as a dowry. Filippo, on the other hand, can't, because even as Erostrato, he's a young man and he's at the beck and call of his father. So unless he has his father's approval for this match, then there's no way he can compete with Cleander. So what he does is he goes and finds his servant, and they're great mates. There's no kind of shenanigans or deception going on between these two. They'll support each other all the way. It's a bit Two Gentlemen of Verona type thing. Oh no, that one was full of backstabbing and deception. Okay, scrap that. Point is, although Erostrato is happy to go ahead and put Erostrato's suit to Damon, he needs his father's public approval to convince anyone of his worth. So rather than actually finding his father, what he does is he grabs a random traveller, persuades him that it would be safest for him to come stay in his household and not reveal where he's from because of a totally made-up feud between people of the Traveller's Town and the people of Ferrara. That's the servants, the false Erostrator's scheme for getting this person to help them out. So what he does is this random traveller poses as Erostrato's father, so he can go to Damon and say, I have a better suit than Cleander and I want to marry your daughter Polynesta. Now, you'll recognise that from Taming of the Shrew, of course, except that in this case there's a lot more interaction of all these people. So we sort of see it play out rather than it just being an aside. Now, meanwhile, an old woman who lives in Damon's household, Damon, remember, is Polynesta's father, gets in a fight with Polynesta's nurse and decides to rat them out by telling her dad what's been going on and also hinting that Polynesta is pregnant. So dad is understandably upset, and not knowing about the person switch, he grabs Filippo and claps him in the dungeon. And so things are looking bad for our young couple. Now, Erostrato, the false Erostrato, is very upset when he hears about this. And basically, the way it resolves is simply that all the non-key people, so the false Filippo is in prison and Polynesta's off stage, but all the other men get together, and there's a really comic scene that you will recognise from Taming of the Shrew, where we see the pretend father leaning out the window, denying entrance into Erostrato's house to the real father, who of course has turned up just hoping to see his son, because that's what happens in these stories. So what we have is we have a false Erostrato, a real Erostrato, a false what's his father's name? Filigano. A false Filigano, a real Filigano, a rival Senex suitor, and an obstructing father. And once we get them all in the room, Cleander, the rival suitor, has a conversation with the real the real Filigano, who that is the real Erostrato's father, who has come up from Sicily, is understandably outraged that his son is denying his existence. He can see that it's the servant that he raised from a child rather than his son, who is pretending to be his son. Now he's starting to worry that maybe his son was murdered and sort of knocked off and got out of the way. So he goes to find a supportive, well-reputed gentleman in the town who might help him out. And the people of Ferrara say, go and see Cleander. He's a locally respected doctor, and he will no doubt support you, because he doesn't want Erostrato to be seen as an appropriate suitor to Polynesta. So that means those two get together, and of course they have a bit of a chat about their backstories, and it turns out that Cleander lost a child, a little 5-year-old boy, back when there was a war in the town that Filigano originally came from. And of course what happens is it turns out that that little boy was the servant child that Filigano rescued from an attacked ship and bought and raised in his household as a servant. So, ta-da! Now it's revealed that the real Dilippo is actually Cleander's son, who had been lost all those years ago. Now, Cleander is so excited and happy to have his son back that he withdraws his claim to Polynesta. Dilippo and Erostrato, Dilippo really, because Erostrato's in prison, in the dungeon, because everyone thinks he's Dilippo who knocked up the girl. Dilippo reveals the swap they did for the sake of love when they first arrived in Ferrara, and Cleander's so delighted at how things have turned out, he withdraws his suit and says, and reveals everything to Father Damon, and says, clearly your daughter has managed to make a perfectly excellent match for herself, and you should agree to let her marry the real Erostrato. And that is basically all it is. It's just everything is revealed, and so everyone's happy for the young couple to actually marry. Now it's been revealed that he is a man of good family, and Dilippo too is similarly a man of good family, reunited. So there's a theme of the reuniting and joining of families at the end. So that's the whole plot, but I really spun that out way longer than it needed, given how basic it is. I apologise for that, but dramaturgically, now this is my little rant, I'm wondering how Gascoigne could be a playwright and be this bad at his job. Because it's not like the play is without its humour or its funny bits. I mean, Shakespeare just ripped off the whole fake father leaning out the window to send away the real father scene and put it wholesale into Taming of the Shrew. But Gascoigne seems to have not had any sense of what people want to see on stage, because after Polynesta has that first exposition scene right at the beginning, we just never see her again. And it says in the stage direction that she appears in the last scene, and so does the real Erostrato, who's been rescued from the dungeon. So they're there standing on stage, But Erostrato has 2 words and Polynester has none. So we never actually see a single scene in the entire play of these 2 lovers who we're supposed to be rooting for being together on stage. So I don't know how we're supposed to care about them or necessarily want them to be together. Delippo, the real Delippo, is really the most central entertaining character we see. And the resolution of the plot happens by way of a bunch of old men standing around talking it through at the end. So there's really no sense of what kind of things on stage are fun for people to watch, or what kinds of characters on stage get people invested and make them want to see what happens to the young couple and get their obstacles overcome. So in a way, what is interesting about this play, nominally it's okay, it was mined by Shakespeare as a subplot, but the development of the nature of comic dramaturgy is the really interesting point, because what we learn, what Shakespeare learned, what later playwrights learned, is that what we really show up for is the parfait amour. We turn up to see young lovers spark together on stage and overcome their obstacles to get together. So let this be a lesson to all aspiring playwrights out there.